The topic of my talk today was on the economics of platforms and their regulation. Platforms have become central to our economies for a number of reasons, and in particular due to the emergence of very large platforms, so the so-called big tech. And they have an increasing role in a number of sectors of the economy. So they started in a few sectors like the sales of books, for example, for Amazon, and then expanded to many new sectors. And today, for example, they are important also in traditional sectors like the automobile sector or health. But on top of the impact on our economies, platforms are also very important for our societies. So they have very large impact. So if you think about privacy concerns, so the fact that platforms collect a lot of data about consumers, users, and they could use this data at the detriment of users, for example, by setting personalized prices. But also users have a distaste for the fact that this data collected about their habits, their behavior, is like an intrusion into their private life. And also platforms raise concerns about cultural diversity and last but not least about political pluralisms. And for all these reasons, both economic and more societal, then there are growing concerns and about platforms, and they have come to the forefront of the public policy debate. And the concerns raised by platforms is due to their market power, so their ability to influence market outcomes. And this market power derives mostly from network effects, so the fact that a large platform or a large network is more attractive for users than a small one. And by attracting a lot of users, then these platforms grow and become dominant in their respective markets. And concerns are that they could exploit this market power to the detriment of consumers and users at large. So it's not necessarily in terms of high prices, because network effects tends to increase demand elasticity, and then platforms react by setting relatively low prices on some sides. But it's also about non-price practices that these platforms have. For example, they may have an incentive and the ability also to bias the intermediation between their different sides, their different groups of users, to their own interest rather than to the interest of their users. For example, a search engine could have an incentive to bias the search results for users, or a music streaming platform to bias music recommendations. And in the recent policy debate, for example, there is this concern about so-called self-preferencing practices, whereby vertically integrated platform like Amazon, for example, could have an incentive to bias its recommendations, its results in favor of its own products and to the detriment of the products offered by third parties. And so the recent regulation in Europe, the Digital Markets Act, prohibits this kind of practice for the dominant platforms. So due to the network effects, so the market where platforms operate tends to become monopolies in the long run, to be monopolized. And this is because due to network effects, there is this tendency that the rich gets richer, and so those large platforms, they become dominant and eventually win completely their markets. So when the market tends to tip and be monopolized, so the question is that whether there is still a potential for competition for the market. That is, if new innovative entrants enter the market, can they displace less efficient incumbents? And it's not necessarily the case. So in digital markets, which may call for some kind of policy intervention to increase contestability, such as, for example, the imposition of interoperability obligations for dominant platforms. So to conclude, platforms emerged and grew in a relatively unregulated environment, but more and more their market power is raising concerns and new regulations are put in place, for example in Europe with the Digital Markets Act.